My mother handed my spare key to my sister and said, "She needs this house more than you do." I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I simply calculated the loss. I waited until they hired movers. I waited until they unpacked every single box. And then I sold the house. When the new owners arrived, they didn't bring a welcome basket. They brought an eviction team. My family wanted a free house. They got a homeless shelter instead. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. My estate in Scottsdale was designed for silence. It was a minimalist box of glass and concrete sitting on 2 acres of desert scrub that I had paid for in cash. It was the only place in the world where my phone didn't ring, where the air was always set to a crisp 68 degrees, and where nothing moved without my permission. But when I pulled up to the gate, that Friday afternoon, that silence was dead. A 26-foot moving truck blocked the driveway like a beached whale. It was parked diagonally, crushing the landscaping I had spent $10,000 installing just last month. The rear ramp was down, and a line of movers was marching like ants into my front door. My front door, which I had locked 8 hours ago. I didn't honk. I didn't rush. I put the car in park and walked up the driveway with the kind of calm that usually precedes a hurricane. The heat hit me first. The front door was propped wide open, with one of my dining chairs bleeding my expensive air conditioning into the 90-degree Arizona afternoon. Inside, the noise was physical. The sound of boots on polished concrete, the screech of packing tape, and the high-pitched screaming of 3 boys, Tyler, Austin, and Connor, who were currently treating my sunken living room like a wrestling ring. And there, in the center of the chaos, was my mother, Susan. She was holding a clipboard directing a mover to be careful with a sofa that wasn't mine. It was a beige, overstuffed floral monstrosity that looked like it had a skin disease. "Mom," I said. My voice cut through the room like a scalpel. She turned not with guilt, but with annoyance. "Samantha, you're early. We aren't quite set up yet. Tyler, get off your aunt's rug. Your shoes are dirty. Why is there a moving truck in my driveway?" My sister Chloe emerged from the hallway. She was holding a tape measure against my floor-to-ceiling windows. "Oh, good, you're here," she said, barely glancing at me. "These blinds have to go. They're too sterile. I need something warmer, maybe velvet." "We talked about this," Susan said, stepping between us as if mediating a business deal. "Chloe needs stability. Her apartment complex was unsafe, and you have 4 bedrooms, Samantha. 4. You are 1 person. It is selfish to hoard this much square footage when your nephews are sharing a room." "I asked you why you are in my house," I repeated. "I didn't invite you." "You gave me a key," Susan said, pulling the silver spare key from her purse. The one I had given her 3 years ago labeled "emergency only." Families help each other in emergencies. Chloe being stressed is an emergency. I looked at the key in her hand. It wasn't a tool for safety anymore. It was a weapon. She had kept it for 3 years, waiting for the moment she could use it to bypass my boundaries. Tyler was currently smearing something sticky on the glass wall. Chloe was already mentally redecorating, erasing my taste to replace it with her clutter. In that moment, a switch flipped in my brain. It was a sensation I knew well from business negotiations, the moment you realize a deal is toxic and the only move is to liquidate. Most people would have screamed. They would have called the police right then to drag their family out. But as I looked at the floral couch bleeding dust onto my floor, I realized something profound. This wasn't my home anymore. The moment they crossed the threshold without my permission, they contaminated it. Even if I kicked them out today, the memory of this violation would be painted on the walls. It was a crime scene. And you don't live in a crime scene. You sell it. I didn't want to fight for this house. I wanted to burn it down. "Fine," I said, my voice terrifyingly level. "If you need the space that badly, I guess we can make it work." Susan smiled, the smug, satisfied smile of a woman who thinks she has won a war because the other side stopped shooting. "I knew you'd be reasonable," she said. "Now help the movers. They charge by the hour." I turned around and walked out the door. I didn't help the movers. I got into my car, drove to the W Hotel in downtown Scottsdale, and booked a suite for the week. Then I opened my laptop and pulled up the contact information for Mr. Vance. It was time to make a sale. I sat on the edge of the king-size bed in the W Hotel watching the security feed on my laptop. The screen showed my living room now transformed into a command center for my sister's chaos. Chloe was directing the movers to push my Italian leather sectional against the wall to make room for her television, a massive cheap thing that dominated the space. My mother was in the kitchen unloading boxes of discount dishware onto my quartz countertops. They moved with the confidence of people who believed they deserved to be there. They didn't know the history of those walls. That house wasn't just a structure of stucco and glass. It was my finish line. It was the physical manifestation of a decade of missed birthdays, 80-hour work weeks, and the kind of stress that makes your hair fall out in clumps. I hadn't bought it with family money. I bought it through a private trust I named Obsidian Holdings, funded entirely by the tech company I built from the ground up. I remembered the day I signed the deed. It was 110 degrees in Scottsdale. I stood in the empty foyer and listened to the silence. It was the first time in my life I felt safe. Safe from the noise, safe from the demands, safe from the endless gravitational pull of my family's dysfunction. For 29 years, I had watched my mother Susan enable Chloe's mediocrity. If Chloe failed a class, it was the teacher's fault. If she lost a job, the boss was a tyrant. If she couldn't pay rent, well, Samantha has plenty, doesn't she? I was the resource. Chloe was the project. Looking at the screen again, I saw Tyler trying to pry open my locked wine fridge with a screwdriver. My mother had taken the spare key, a key I gave her specifically for life or death emergencies, and used it to bypass the only boundary I had left. I told her, use this if I am in a coma. She heard, use this if Chloe is inconvenienced. It was a violation so absolute it made my chest ache. But as I watched them settling in, treating my sanctuary like a conquered territory, the ache turned into something else. It turned into calculation. If I went back there with the police today, it would be a mess. Screaming, crying, guilt trips about family duty. They would drag it out. They would make me the villain. But I wasn't just a daughter anymore. I was a CEO, and I knew how to handle a hostile takeover. The house was no longer my home. It was a distressed asset, and when you have a distressed asset that is bleeding value, you don't emotionalize it, you liquidate it. I pulled up my contact list and found the number for Mr. Vance. He was a commercial developer I had met at a charity gala last year, a shark in a bespoke suit. He bought properties for cash, usually to bulldoze them or flip them to corporate investors. He didn't care about feelings. He cared about margins. I sent him a text message. I have a property in North Scottsdale, 2 acres, modern build. I want to sell it off-market, cash only, immediate close. There is a catch. He replied in 30 seconds. I'm listening. I typed back, my fingers moving with the precision of a pianist playing a funeral march. Sold as is, with occupants. I need it done by Friday. The response came back with a single number. It was aggressive, low, a shark smelling blood. It was $1.5 million, about $300,000 under market value. I looked at the security feed one last time. Chloe was putting her feet up on my coffee table. Deal, I typed. I didn't lose a home that day. I traded a liability for a war chest, and I was about to spend every penny of it on my freedom. The next 3 days were a masterclass in silence. Most people think silence is passive. They think it means you are sulking or hiding or giving up. But in business, silence is the most aggressive move you can make. It forces the other side to fill the void with their own assumptions. My mother assumed my silence was submission. I sat in the hotel suite, 70 stories above the desert, and watched my life being dismantled on a 13-inch laptop screen. The security cameras, the ones I had paid thousands of dollars to install, were now my private reality show. On Saturday morning, I watched Susan rearrange my kitchen. She moved my espresso machine to the garage because she said it took up too much counter space. She replaced it with a blender she had brought from her apartment. She was nesting. She sent me a text message at 10 o'clock in the morning. I am glad you are taking some time to cool off, Samantha. We need the Wi-Fi password. The boys are bored. I didn't reply. I didn't block her. I just let the message sit there unanswered. By not replying, I was giving her tacit permission to stay. I was feeding her delusion. On Saturday afternoon, Chloe started painting. I watched on the living room feed as she laid down drop cloths. She was painting my gallery white walls a suffocating shade of beige. She was erasing the architectural integrity of the house to make it look like a suburban tract home. A part of me wanted to call the police right then. Destruction of property is a crime, but I stopped myself. In game theory, there is a concept called the sunk cost fallacy. It is the tendency to continue an endeavor once an investment in money, effort, or time has been made. The more you invest, the harder it is to walk away. If I kicked them out now on Saturday, they could still pack up. They could still call their old landlord and say it was a mistake. They could salvage their old lives. The damage would be minimal. I didn't want minimal damage. I wanted total liquidation. I needed them to invest. I needed them to spend every ounce of energy and money they had on this move. I needed them to burn the bridge back to their old life so thoroughly that when I pushed them off the cliff, there was nowhere to land. So I let them paint. I let them unpack. I let them think they had won. On Sunday, the trap snapped shut. I was watching the camera feed from the kitchen. Chloe was on her phone, pacing back and forth. The audio on the new cameras was crystal clear. "Yes," she was saying, "I am confirming the termination of my lease. We are fully moved out. You can keep the security deposit for the cleaning fee. We don't need the keys anymore." I leaned back in my chair, a cold sense of satisfaction settling in my chest. She had done it. She had canceled her lease. She had officially made herself homeless. 10 minutes later, she posted a photo on Instagram. It was a selfie of her and the boys in my living room with my pool sparkling in the background. The caption read, "New beginnings. So blessed to finally have a home that fits our family. Number homeowner, number blessed." She wasn't just squatting anymore. She was staking a public claim. She was tying her social reputation to a house she didn't own. I closed my laptop. The deal with Mr. Vance was scheduled for Monday morning. They had spent 3 days digging their own grave. Now I was going to sell the cemetery. The boardroom of Vance Development Group was a vacuum. It was on the 45th floor of a downtown high-rise, soundproofed and refrigerated to a constant 65 degrees. There was no desert dust here. No screaming nephews, no guilt. Mr. Vance sat at the head of a mahogany table that was long enough to land a plane on. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a math equation in a $3,000 suit. He was reviewing the contract on his tablet, his face completely devoid of expression. $1.5 million, he said, his voice dry as sand. Cash wire. Closing today. Title transfers immediately from Obsidian Holdings to VDG Asset Recovery. He looked up at me. His eyes were pale gray, the color of a shark's underbelly. "You understand the terms, Samantha. Once you sign, the property is mine. The occupants are mine. You have no say in how I handle the asset." "I understand," I said. My mother would have called this a tragedy. She would have said I was selling my legacy, my hard work, my dream. But sitting in that cold leather chair, I didn't feel like I was losing a dream. I felt like a surgeon cutting out a tumor. I had built that house to be a sanctuary. My family had turned it into a prison, and the only way to escape a prison is to blow a hole in the wall. "They are currently inside," I said, sliding the keycard for the security system across the table. "They have changed the locks on the interior doors, but the perimeter is digital. This gives you master admin access." Vance picked up the card. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just nodded. To him, my mother and sister weren't people. They were biological liabilities attached to a piece of real estate, like termites or black mold. And he was the exterminator. "We have reviewed the security footage you authorized," Vance said. "The occupants are currently painting the interior walls. Beige." I flinched just a little. "Don't worry," he said. "It helps our case." He pushed the digital pad toward me. The signature line was glowing blue. I didn't hesitate. I didn't think about Christmas mornings that would never happen, or the pool parties I never hosted. I thought about the text message my mother sent me 3 days ago. "You'll thank us for this one day." I signed my name. The screen flashed green. "Transaction complete." "The wire has been initiated," Vance said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. "It was a pleasure doing business with you, Miss Sterling. You can leave the rest to my team." I walked out of the building and into the blinding midday sun. I checked my bank account on my phone. The balance had jumped by 7 figures. I was rich. I was homeless, and I was free. Most people don't understand the difference between civil law and criminal law when it comes to housing. My mother certainly didn't. She thought that because she had moved her furniture in, she had established tenancy. She thought that if I wanted to kick her out, I would have to go to a judge, file an eviction notice, and give her 30 days to vacate. She was counting on the slow grinding gears of the civil court system to buy her a month of free rent. But she had made a fatal miscalculation. She wasn't dealing with a landlord anymore. She was dealing with a corporation. This is the corporate shield. It is cold, it is brutal, and it is fast. When I owned the house, they were guests who had overstayed their welcome. It was a domestic dispute. Police hate domestic disputes. They tell you to take a walk and cool off. But the moment I signed that deed, the legal reality shifted. Obsidian Holdings no longer owned the property. VDG Asset Recovery did. And VDG Asset Recovery had never invited Susan or Chloe onto the premises. VDG had no familial relationship with them. VDG had no verbal agreements. To the new owner, they weren't tenants. They were trespassers. And because Chloe had decided to paint the living room, they weren't just trespassing. They were committing felony destruction of corporate property. I sat in my rental car 2 blocks away from the house and watched the status updates roll in on my phone. I had transferred admin rights to Vance, but I hadn't deleted the app yet. Motion detected living room. Motion detected driveway. Vance didn't send a process server with an eviction notice. He didn't send a letter asking them nicely to leave. He treated it exactly for what it was, a hostile occupation of a high-value asset. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my phone buzzed with a final notification from the security system. System disarmed by master admin. Then a text from Vance came through to my personal number. It was just 3 words. Security is on site. It wasn't a warning. It was a notification of execution. The trap I had set 3 days ago, the silence, the waiting, the sunk cost, was about to snap shut, and it was going to break their necks. Friday afternoon in Scottsdale is unforgiving. The sun hangs low and heavy, turning the asphalt into a frying pan. It was 102 degrees when the convoy turned onto my street. I wasn't there to see it, but Mr. Vance's head of security sent me the body cam footage later. It was part of the closing documentation. 3 black SUVs rolled up the driveway in a silent, ominous formation. They didn't park on the street. They pulled right up to the front door, blocking in the moving truck that was still there, half unloaded. Behind them came a sheriff's cruiser, lights flashing but siren silent. Inside the house, my mother was probably making iced tea. Chloe was probably admiring her beige walls. They thought they had won the war of attrition. They thought I was still sulking in a hotel room waiting to apologize. They didn't hear the doorbell ring because the security team didn't ring it. The lead officer, a man built like a refrigerator, simply swiped a master key card over the digital panel I had installed. The lock chirped a cheerful "access granted." The door swung open. The air conditioning rushed out to meet the heat, followed immediately by the scream of my sister. "Who are you? Get out of my house!" The security team didn't shout. They didn't argue. They poured into the foyer like oil, moving with the terrifying efficiency of professionals who do this for a living. They weren't moving furniture. They were securing a site. "Ma'am, step away from the wall," the lead officer said. His voice was flat bored. "You are trespassing on private corporate property." My mother stormed out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Excuse me, this is my daughter's house. I am Susan Sterling. You are leaving right now, or I am calling the police." "The police are already here, Mrs. Sterling," the officer said, stepping aside to reveal the sheriff's deputy standing in the doorway. "And this property does not belong to an Isabella Sterling. It belongs to VDG Asset Recovery, and you are currently defacing it." He pointed to the wet beige paint on the walls. "That is felony destruction of property," the sheriff said. "We have a warrant to clear the premises. You have 10 minutes to vacate, or you will be removed in handcuffs." The color drained from my mother's face so fast she looked like a ghost. No, that's impossible." She gave me a key. The deed was transferred on Monday," the officer cut her off. "You have 9 minutes. It wasn't an eviction. It was an extraction." Vance's team didn't pack boxes. They grabbed armfuls of clothes, lamps, and kitchenware and marched them out the front door. They didn't put them in the moving truck. They dumped them on the curb. My Italian leather sofa, the curb. Chloe's flat-screen TV, the curb. The boys' video game consoles, the curb. It was a mountain of domestic debris baking in the Arizona sun. My phone rang at 3:15. I was sitting by the hotel pool sipping an iced coffee. I looked at the caller ID. "Mom." I answered on the second ring. "Samantha?" She wasn't screaming. She was shrieking a sound so high and panicked it distorted the speaker. "There are men here. They're throwing our things on the street. They say you sold the house. Tell them to stop. Tell them it's a mistake." I took a sip of my coffee. The ice clinked against the glass. "It's not a mistake, Mom." "How could you do this?" she sobbed. "We have nowhere to go. They're threatening to arrest Chloe. Fix this. Call them off right now." "I can't," I said. My voice was calm, steady, lighter than it had been in years. "I don't own the property anymore. You're trespassing on corporate land. You'll have to take it up with the owner." "You are my daughter," she screamed. "You owe us." "I don't owe you a thing," I said. "You wanted the house. You can keep the paint. But you can't stay." I hung up. Then I blocked the number. On the security feed, I watched as the last of their boxes hit the pavement. The security team locked the door behind them. The house stood silent, empty, and beige. It wasn't my problem anymore. It was just a building in the rearview mirror. The fallout was absolute. Chloe ended up in a roadside motel on the outskirts of Phoenix, her bank account drained by the cancellation fees, the movers, and the security deposit she had forfeited on her old apartment. She had gambled her entire financial future on the assumption that I would fold, and she had lost everything. Susan was staying with a friend, spending her days leaving voicemails that went straight to a blocked inbox. She was furious, but fury without leverage is just noise. I sat in the first-class lounge at Sky Harbor International Airport watching the planes taxi on the tarmac. My phone was on the table, silent for the first time in years. I had deleted their contact information. I had dissolved the trust. I had severed the last tether. I opened my banking app one last time. The wire transfer from Vance Development Group had cleared. $1.5 million. It was a staggering amount of money, but looking at those numbers, I didn't just see currency. I saw severance pay. I saw the final settlement of a contract that had been draining me since birth. People talk about family like it is a sacred bond, an unbreakable vow. But to me, family had become a subscription service. I couldn't cancel a debt that accrued interest no matter how much I paid. Selling the house wasn't an act of cruelty. It was a necessary liquidation. I had traded a pile of stucco and glass for a future that belonged entirely to me. I picked up my boarding pass. Destination unknown to them, known only to me. I walked toward the gate, my steps light, my breathing steady. I didn't look back at the city that held the wreckage of my family. I didn't need to. I had sold the burden, and I was keeping the profit. If you've ever had to burn a bridge to save yourself, share this story. And tell me in the comments, would you have sold the house or would you have called the cops? Let's talk.